This is a warrior sim that enables us to check out level 40 gameplay. I'm going to be simming for a variety of specs. It's going to be dual wield specs and then two-handed specs. For the two-handers, there's going to be Fury and Arms, and for dual wield, it's only going to be Fury. I'm going to cover the rotations that we're simming with and the reason why those are the rotations. But as far as what is on the character that's being simmed, the gear is the best in slot level 25 gear, including the weapons. So these characters are not being simmed with the correct gear for their level to try to make up for that, but without having to just guess at what kind of gear we're going to have in the next phase. I turned on these world buffs because I want this extra 10% crit. I think it's reasonable to assume that we'll have something around like this 28% total that we have once we're actually in a raid and have all of our buffs in gear. We don't have quite this much at level 25, but we also don't have as many points in cruelty. We're getting pretty close to 28 once we're all geared and buffed and in raids. So that's the reason that we have these world buffs on. It's meant to give us a little bit more attack power, so that way we can rationalize about how good this talent is, Bloodthirst, and also meant to give us more crit, because if we simulated with none of these buffs on, we'd have like 5% crit, and flurry uptime would be just about nothing in the sim. But in reality, it's going to be up a lot. Let's jump into the simulations now. So first, this is a dual wield spec, single-minded Fury, and we ended up taking Raging Blow for it. We get 640 DPS. Awesome. Let's see what the next one is. Now what we have is a Fury spec, but for two-handers. That's the reason we have Quick Strike here. That's basically the only thing that's any different. And when we sim with this spec, we actually see that the DPS is quite a bit lower, you see. A 60 DPS difference, so almost a 10% difference between the Fury two-handed spec and the Fury dual wield spec. Let's go over the rotations really quick. For the dual wield spec, it's really, really simple. When you're over 80 rage, you're going to use Heroic Strike, Whirlwind, and Bloodthirst. If you're under 80 rage, the only ability you'll ever cast is Raging Blow. The reason that we do it like this is otherwise we'll really hammer the consume by rage uptime. If you're able to Heroic Strike under 80 rage, you'll almost always be under 80 rage, and so that would decimate your consume by rage uptime. And then by enabling Whirlwind and Bloodthirst to only be used above the threshold to proc this, we're pretty much guaranteed that when these get cast, it'll just put us barely under the threshold. Sometimes, of course, it'll go off at like 80 rage and we'll be at like 50 total, but that's okay. We can climb back quickly. Now let's go back to the two-hander. Two-hander, it's basically the same. The only real difference is that we don't have Heroic Strike enabled because we have Quick Strike enabled. Watch what happens if we put on Heroic Strike. It's going to absolutely tank our DPS. So we go from 590 about to 532. This is why we're not going to be using Heroic Strike, and any of the two-handed specs will have the same behavior occur in absolutely all of them across the board. Now what I want to investigate is how good is Flagellation. So this is the same two-handed spec we were just looking at, but now we have Flagellation. Remember, the last value we got was about 590. Let's see what we get when we sim with Flagellation. 630 almost. Great. So we see we get almost a 10% DPS increase. Or another way to put it is two-handed with Flagellation is about as good as dual wield without Flagellation. Makes me wonder how good is dual wield with Flagellation, which is why that's the next thing we're going to test. And the cat's already kind of out of the bag because the sim results up. But then we get 690 damage when we do the original spec, but instead we substitute in Flagellation. So we see here right now the difference that I'm showing on the screen. This is dual wield with Flagellation. This is dual wield without. And then this is two-handed with Flagellation. And this is two-handed without. The only spec that we have left now to go over is Arms for two-handers. Let's check that really quick. Here we have Arms two-handed spec with Flagellation. Let's run the simulator. Wow. So this is actually way better than two-hand Fury with Flagellation. Let's see, what did two-hand Fury with Flagellation look like again? Not this. This is single-minded Fury. So it's also beating dual wield. How much is it beating the two-handed by, though? Whoa, almost 100 DPS. A little more, actually. Yeah, like 130. Nuts. I wonder what the Arms specs damage looks like if we don't have Flagellation. Maybe it gets even better. Raging Blow goes good with two-handers. Let's see. And the damage actually goes down. So if we do use Raging Blow on two-handers, then it looks like we have similar DPS to one-handers with Flagellation. Yeah. So two-hander arms with Flagellation is the best. And it seems like with all of the specs, Flagellation beats Raging Blow. Raging Blow will gain a little more value in some ways in that the weapon damage on your two-hander is going to ramp up a lot with the item level, but the AP that we're getting from these extra world buffs I have turned on, that's not going to probably go up a whole lot more with the gear. It'll like probably go up more than what these actual world buffs give, but it's not going to be anywhere near as stark of a difference as having a 30 DPS two-hander to like, I don't know, maybe they'll give us 60 DPS two-handers. That wouldn't be too surprising for me. That'd be similar to a weak item in MC, but they've given casters items that are better than MC items, so I don't think that would be too ridiculous to assume as a possibility. There's one more thing we can check here that's really interesting, and it is statistics on the damage spread. So right now, we're looking at two-handed arms statistics, and we can see that Flagellation is up 65% of the time. Now, this will actually be the same for all of the specs, and the reason why is Flagellation's only going to be impacted by Blood Rage and Berserker Rage, and there is no RNG with that. So let's check how these guys all are in the stats department really quick. And you'll see Flagellation, yeah, it's like 64% there, and 65% again here. So they're practically the same values across the board. I'm kind of curious about what the flurry uptime looks like for the dual wield specs. So let's see that. It's up about 60% of the time. Okay, that's cool. This will actually get quite a bit higher. It's a if you remember from math class, it's like an exponential curve when it comes to how the actual uptime for flurry is impacted by crit. So it will look something like this as you get more crit, and then it levels off. It's gonna like asymptote to 100%, but it starts slowing down a lot around here, which is like 85%. I don't want to show you the math, but this is just something I checked into a very long time ago. Not too much more to really look here. You're gonna see that all of these have like super high uptime on Consumed by Rage. Let's show you really quickly why we don't have Heroic Strike in the two-handers. You'll notice that we can absolutely decimate this Consumed by Rage uptime by swapping that setting. So only thing we're changing here is when we're over 80 Rage, you can imagine that we're going to do a Quick Strike and a Heroic Strike simultaneously, or one of these other two moves and a Heroic Strike simultaneously. Watch it just tank our DPS. Nice. Take 110 DPS off the top, and then we'll go back to the stats. And wow, okay, well, I guess I was actually wrong. Look, the Consumed by Rage uptime is not actually that impacted by taking more rage when you're near the top. The big thing is to not be using any rage as you approach 80, and then send it. Cool? So yeah, remember, if you're under 80 rage, hold it. If you're over 80, it doesn't matter a whole bunch what you do with respect to Consumed by Rage uptime.